better discipline from you. Do it again, and you're disqualified from the next 3 meets. Understand?
I told you specifically, absolutely no running by the pool. Do not walk away from me.
I wasn't running. You need to calm down.
The first thing she said to me was, "You're not allowed to be here." No greeting, no introduction, no hesitation, just that. It wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. There was something in her tone, sharp, confident, almost rehearsed, like she had said those words before and expected them to work every single time. I remember standing there for a second, genuinely confused, not offended, not angry, just confused. Because in that moment, nothing about the situation made sense. I had a towel draped over my shoulder, still slightly damp from the humidity in the air. My keys were in my right hand, the same keys I had used just minutes earlier to unlock the front door of my new home. My home. And I was still getting used to saying that in my head, because just 2 days earlier, this place had been nothing more than a listing on a website. A few photos, a description, a maybe. But now it was real. The quiet streets, the neatly trimmed lawns, the identical mailboxes lined up like they were placed with a ruler. All of it. Mine. Well, at least that's what I thought. It was only my second day after moving in, and if you've ever moved into a new place, you know exactly what that feels like. Boxes everywhere, half-open suitcases, that weird mix of excitement and exhaustion. You don't fully feel settled yet. You're still learning where things are, still figuring out which light switch controls what. And most importantly, you're trying to find small moments of peace in the middle of all that chaos. For me, that moment was supposed to be simple. A swim. That's it. Nothing dramatic, nothing complicated, just a quiet break under the sun. The weather couldn't have been more perfect. The sunlight reflected off the surface of the water, creating that soft shimmer that almost pulls you in. There was a light breeze, not too strong, just enough to make the air feel fresh. It was the kind of moment where everything slows down. The kind of moment where you think, yeah, I made the right decision moving here. But then, that voice. You're not allowed to be here. I looked up, and that's when I saw her clearly for the first time. She was standing directly in front of the pool gate, positioned in a way that made it impossible to walk past her without engaging. Arms crossed tightly, shoulders squared, chin slightly raised. It wasn't just body language, it was a statement, a silent one that said, "I'm in charge here." And the more I looked at her, the more obvious it became. This wasn't her first confrontation. She was comfortable. Too comfortable. "I said you're not allowed here," she repeated, this time slower, more deliberate, like she thought the problem was that I hadn't understood her the first time. I blinked, processing the situation, then gave a small, polite smile. Not because I found anything funny, but because sometimes politeness is the easiest way to de-escalate something before it turns into a problem. "Oh, I think there's a misunderstanding," I said calmly. "I just moved in." For a brief moment, I expected some kind of shift. Maybe curiosity, maybe hesitation, maybe even a simple, "Oh, really?" But none of that happened. She didn't move, didn't soften, didn't even blink. Instead, her expression hardened. "I've lived here for 12 years, she said sharply. "I know everyone." She paused for half a second, just enough to let the next part land harder. "And you're not one of them." And that's when something clicked in my mind. This wasn't about confusion. This wasn't about rules. And it definitely wasn't about the pool. This was about control. You see, there's a certain type of person who becomes very comfortable in environments where nothing changes. Same neighbors, same routines, same unspoken hierarchy. And when something or someone new enters that space, it disrupts that balance. Even if it's something small, even if it's just a new face. I took a slow breath, keeping my tone steady. "I moved into the corner house," I explained. "Just closed last week." And for a split second, I thought that might be enough. That maybe, just maybe, this would clear things up. But instead, she laughed. Not a friendly laugh, not even a surprised one. It was short, sharp, dismissive. The kind of laugh that isn't meant to respond, it's meant to shut you down. "Oh, honey," she said, shaking her head slightly. "That doesn't give you access to the pool." And right there, that exact moment, I knew this wasn't going to be a normal conversation, because what she didn't know, which she had absolutely no idea about, was something I had only fully understood myself a few days earlier, something that changed everything. This pool, it wasn't what she thought it was. When I first looked at the property, I almost didn't believe it either. In fact, I remember sitting across from my real estate agent, staring at the paperwork like I was reading it wrong, because it didn't make sense. At least, not at first. She mentioned it casually, like it was just a small detail. "Oh, and just so you know," she said, flipping through the pages, "the community pool is technically on your land." I actually laughed, out loud. I thought she was joking. Because why wouldn't I? Why would a shared neighborhood pool be sitting on private property? It sounded ridiculous. But then, she stopped flipping the pages, turned the document toward me, and pointed. "Here," she said, "look at the boundary lines." And that's when I saw it. Clear, precise, undeniable. The survey lines, the property edges, the exact legal outline of what I was buying. And right there, inside those lines, was the pool. At first, I didn't say anything. I just stared at it, trying to make sense of it, trying to find the mistake. Because surely there had to be one, right? But there wasn't. Everything checked out. Every document, every measurement, every legal description. All of it pointed to the same conclusion. The pool, the one everyone in the neighborhood used, sat entirely within the limits of the property I had just purchased. Not HOA owned, not shared land, not community property. Mine. Now, to be fair, the situation wasn't as dramatic as it sounded. At least, not back then. From what I was told, the previous owner had never made an issue out of it. They allowed the HOA to use the space, informally. No contracts, no legal agreements, no official transfer of ownership. Just understanding. A handshake situation. Something built on trust. And over time, that understanding turned into assumption. The HOA started acting like the pool belonged to them. They maintained it, set rules around it, controlled access. And since no one challenged it, no one questioned it, the residents accepted it. New families moved in and believed the same thing. Years passed, and eventually, that assumption became reality in everyone's mind. Until now, standing there at the gate, looking at this woman blocking my path, I realized something else. She wasn't used to being questioned. She wasn't used to being wrong. And more importantly, she wasn't used to someone standing calmly in front of her without backing down. "I think there's been some confusion," I said, keeping my voice level. "The pool is actually part of my property." And then she laughed again. But this time, it was louder, sharper, more aggressive. "Oh, that's cute," she said. "You really believe that?" I didn't answer right away. Because moments like this, they're not about volume. They're not about who can argue better. They're about something much simpler. Truth. And I knew something she didn't. I had proof. But instead of asking, instead of listening, instead of even considering the possibility that she might be wrong, she did something else. She reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and looked straight at me. "I'm calling the police." And just like that, what started as a simple misunderstanding turned into something much bigger. And that's when everything escalated. "I'm calling the police." She didn't whisper it. She didn't hesitate. She said it loudly, clearly, like she wanted the entire neighborhood to hear every single word, like she wanted witnesses, like she wanted an audience. For a brief second, I thought she was bluffing, because people say things like that all the time. It's a power move, a way to intimidate someone, a way to take control of a situation when you feel like you're losing it. You throw out the idea of authority, hoping the other person backs down before things go any further. And most of the time, it works. Most people don't want trouble. Most people don't want police involved, so they step away, even if they know they're right. But something about her tone told me this wasn't a bluff. Then she started dialing, and just like that, the situation shifted. What had started as an uncomfortable conversation turned into something heavier, more serious, more real. "You're trespassing," she said, pacing near the gate as the phone rang. "And you're refusing to leave private property." There it was again, that word, trespassing. I almost smiled, not because it was funny, but because of how wrong it was, because of how confident she sounded while saying something that couldn't have been further from the truth. Trespassing isn't just a casual accusation. It carries weight, legal weight. It implies that someone is somewhere they don't belong, without permission, without right. And yet here she was, throwing that word at me, while standing on land that legally belonged to me. "Go ahead," I said calmly. I didn't raise my voice, didn't argue, didn't try to stop her. Instead, I walked past her, slowly, deliberately, and sat down on one of the pool chairs. "I'll wait." That moment, that's when everything changed, because she wasn't expecting that. She expected resistance. She expected an argument, maybe even panic. She expected me to defend myself, loudly, emotionally, desperately. But not this. Not someone sitting down, completely relaxed, like none of this bothered me at all. I leaned back slightly in the chair, letting the sunlight hit my face. From the outside, it probably looked like I didn't have a care in the world. But in reality, I was just confident. Confident in something she didn't know. Confident in something she hadn't even considered. And that's when I realized something else. She wasn't prepared for what was about to happen. The call connected, and immediately her tone shifted. It became more urgent, more dramatic. "Yes, I'd like to report a trespasser," she said, pacing back and forth now. "He's refusing to leave the community pool area." She paused, listening, then continued. "No, I don't know who he is. He just showed up. He's acting like he owns the place." I glanced over at her for a moment. That line almost made me laugh. Acting like I own the place. She kept talking, and with every sentence, the story grew. Details stretched. Assumptions turned into facts. Confidence turned into exaggeration. "He walked right in like he belongs here," she said. "He's being confrontational. I feel unsafe." That one caught my attention. Unsafe? I hadn't raised my voice, hadn't moved aggressively, hadn't done anything except sit down. But in her version of the story, the situation had already escalated far beyond reality. I didn't interrupt, didn't react, didn't correct her. Because sometimes, the best thing you can do is nothing. Let people talk. Let them commit to their version of events. Let them build their narrative. Because the more they say, the harder it becomes to walk it back later. The next 10 minutes felt strangely quiet. Not silent, but heavy. You could hear small things. The faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. The distant sound of a car passing by.
The soft ripple of water in the pool. Normal sounds. Peaceful sounds. Sounds that didn't match the tension in the air at all. She stayed on the phone the entire time, walking back and forth, occasionally glancing at me like she expected me to suddenly get up and run. But I didn't move. I just sat there, waiting. And after a while, something interesting started to happen. Her confidence began to shift. At first, she was loud, certain, almost aggressive. But as the minutes passed, there were small cracks, a pause here, a second of hesitation there, a slight change in tone. because deep down, even if she wouldn't admit it, there was a possibility, a small one, that she might be wrong. Eventually, she ended the call. "They're on their way," she said, looking at me. Her voice was still firm, but not as sharp as before, not as certain. I nodded once. Good. That one word seemed to bother her more than anything else I had said. Maybe because it didn't match the reaction she expected. Maybe because it showed I wasn't worried. Or maybe because it made her question something she didn't want to question. Time slowed down again. Another few minutes passed. And then, finally, we heard it. The sound of a car approaching, tires rolling slowly over pavement, an engine coming to a stop. A police car pulled up near the entrance, and just like that, everything shifted. 2 officers stepped out, calm, professional, composed, the kind of presence that immediately changes the energy of a situation. Before they could even take a full look around, she rushed toward them, quick, eager, almost relieved. "Officer, thank goodness you're here," she said, pointing directly at me. "This man is trespassing and refusing to leave." The officers didn't react immediately. They didn't rush, didn't assume. They just listened. One of them turned toward me.
"Sir, is that true?" I opened my mouth to respond, but she cut in again. "He doesn't live here," she said quickly. "I've never seen him before." The officer raised a hand slightly, not aggressive, not forceful, just enough to pause her. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "I'll speak to him." And that right there, that was the first real crack in her confidence. Because for the first time since this started, she wasn't in control of the conversation anymore. I stood up slowly. No rush, no sudden movements, just calm. "I just moved in," I said, "the property next to the pool." The officer studied me for a moment, then nodded slightly. "And you have ID?" "Of course." I reached into my pocket and handed it over. He looked it over carefully, not just glancing at it, actually checking it. Then he looked back up, and I could tell he was still assessing the situation, still putting the pieces together. And that's when I said something that changed everything. "There's something else you should probably see." I turned, walked over to my bag, and picked it up, slowly, deliberately, because I knew this moment mattered. I opened it and pulled out the folder I had brought with me earlier. A simple folder, nothing special, but inside, everything. And I didn't bring it by accident. Something in the back of my mind, a quiet instinct, had told me before I even left the house. Take it with you. Maybe it was the new environment. Maybe it was uncertainty. Or maybe I just had a feeling. Inside the folder were the documents, the survey, the deed, the legal descriptions, every piece of proof I needed. I walked back over and handed them to the officer. He took them, opened the folder, and began reading. The second officer stepped closer, looking over as well. And for the first time since this entire situation began, things got quiet. Not just calm, not just still, but truly quiet. Because now, it wasn't about opinions anymore. It wasn't about assumptions. It wasn't about who sounded more confident. It was about facts. And the truth was finally about to speak for itself. The officers took their time reviewing the documents. And I mean, they really took their time. There was no rush, no impatience, no quick judgment. They didn't flip through the pages like it was just routine paperwork. They studied them, carefully, deliberately, line by line. And in that moment, everything slowed down. The noise of the world around us seemed to fade. The faint sounds of the neighborhood, the breeze, the water in the pool, all of it became background. Because right now, none of that mattered. What mattered was what was written on those pages. I stood there quietly, watching, not saying a word, not interrupting, because I knew something important. This wasn't a moment that needed explanation. The documents would speak for themselves. The first officer held the papers steady, his eyes moving slowly across each line. The second officer leaned in slightly, reading along. Every now and then, one of them would pause,
Not for long, just a second. But it was enough, because I could see it happening. The shift. It was subtle at first. A slight tightening of the brow. A quick glance exchanged between them. A small pause that lasted just a fraction longer than it should have. But when you're paying attention, you notice those things. And in that moment, I knew exactly what they were seeing. The truth. Not opinions. Not assumptions. Not years of neighborhood habits. Just facts. Clear. Documented. Legal facts. Behind me, I could feel her presence. Still standing there. Still waiting. Still holding on to the belief that she was right. Because in her mind, there was no way this could go any other direction. For years, she had believed the same thing. That the HOA controlled the pool. That the rules she enforced were real. That her authority was unquestionable. And when you believe something for that long, it stops feeling like a belief. It starts feeling like truth.
But belief and truth are not always the same thing. Ma'am? The officer's voice broke the silence. Calm, measured, neutral. He turned slightly toward her, still holding the documents in his hand. It appears he's correct. Silence. Not the kind of silence where people are just quiet. The kind of silence where everything stops. Her expression froze, completely, like her mind needed a second, just to process what she had heard. You could almost see the moment it hit her, that split second where reality didn't match expectation, where certainty started to crack. "That's not possible," she said quickly, too quickly, like the words came out before she even had time to think them through. "The HOA owns the pool." Her voice had changed, still firm, but there was something else in it now, something beneath the surface. Doubt. The officer shook his head slightly, not dismissive, not aggressive, just factual. "According to these documents, the pool is within his property boundaries." And just like that, everything changed. You could see it, clear as day, the realization, the disbelief, the sudden loss of control. Moments ago, she had been completely certain she was right, certain she had authority, certain she was in charge. But now, that certainty was gone, replaced by something else entirely, something unfamiliar, something uncomfortable, because for the first time, she wasn't the one setting the rules. She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, like she wanted to push back, but no words came out. Because what do you say when the facts are right in front of you? You can argue opinions, you can debate interpretations, but you can't argue with something that's written, signed, and legally binding. And in that moment, she knew it. The officers handed the documents back to me, carefully, respectfully, and then one of them turned toward me.
"Sir," he said, "do you want to press charges for a false report?" It was a simple question, direct, professional, but behind it, there was weight, because what had just happened wasn't nothing. She had called the police, made a claim, accused me of trespassing, escalated a situation that didn't need to be escalated. Legally, I had every right to say yes, and for a brief moment, I thought about it. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of principle. Because situations like this, they matter. But then, I paused, and I looked around. At the pool, the water still calm, untouched. At the neighborhood, quiet, peaceful, unaware of how close things had come to turning into something much bigger. At the situation as a whole, and I realized something. Winning didn't require punishment. Sometimes, the truth is enough. So I shook my head, slowly, calmly. "No," I said, "I just want to enjoy my pool." That line, it stayed in the air for a moment. Simple, clear, final. No anger, no pride, no need to prove anything more. The officers nodded. They understood. And just like that, the situation was over. No more arguments, no more accusations, no more tension. Just silence. The officers returned to their car,
The sound of the engine starting broke the stillness for a moment. Then they drove off, and with them, the conflict left too. She stood there for a few seconds longer, still, quiet. Then, without saying another word, she turned and walked away. No apology, no explanation, just distance and silence. In the days that followed, word spread quickly. Neighborhoods are like that. News travels fast, especially when it challenges something people have believed for years. At first, it was just looks, people passing by a little slower than usual, glancing toward the pool, toward my house. Then came the conversations, a knock on the door.
Hey, is it true? Another neighbor. I had no idea. Some curious, some apologetic, some just trying to understand how something like this had gone unnoticed for so long. And the answer was always the same: assumptions. For years, everyone believed the same thing. The HOA controlled the pool. The rules were official. The authority was real. No one questioned it, because no one had a reason to, until someone finally did. As for her, she never approached me again. No more confrontations, no more raised voices, no more attempts to assert control. Just distance and silence. And the pool? It stayed exactly what it had always been. The same water, the same space, the same place where neighbors gathered. The only difference now was that everyone finally knew the truth. And sometimes, that's all it takes.